Have you ever noticed how, like, in a fraction of a second, before your conscious brain can even process a single letter of text on a page, you've already been sold a massive
Oh,
promise?
absolutely. It happens instantly.
Yeah, and it completely bypasses your skepticism. It basically
Ooh.
maps out this entire psychological journey and suggests that, everything you think you know about your own biological limitations might just be completely wrong.
Right, because visual media operates on a totally different frequency than text.
Exactly. And that's exactly why today we are stepping away from the dense stacks of research papers and the data sets we normally parse on this deep dive. Instead, we are looking at just one single, highly calibrated visual argument.
And it is a fascinating one,
It really is. We're looking at the front cover of the book, Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza.
which is honestly a complete masterclass in visual semiotics. I mean, we so often treat book covers as just, I don't know, mere packaging.
Like a decorative layer just to protect the pages.
Exactly. But they are incredibly potent psychological tools. A cover like this one, it's designed to do just immense heavy lifting instantly.
Yeah, it has to capture your attention, right?
It has to capture attention, establish empirical authority, evoke a sense of ancient mystery, and deliver this life-altering proposition before you're even aware you are analyzing it.
It's wild when you really break it down. So our mission today is to deconstruct all of that. The specific typography, the spatial layout, the intricate imagery on this cover, just to understand the mechanics of how that massive promise is built and delivered to you, the reader.
I love it.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with, I guess, the central linguistic tension that really anchors the entire cover.
The title.
Right, the title, sitting right across the top half, just demanding immediate attention, is the primary title, Becoming Supernatural. And it's rendered in this very weighty, classic serif font, all caps.
It looks monumental, very authoritative.
Totally monumental. Yeah. But then, right beneath it, in a much smaller italicized font, is the subtitle, How Common People Are Doing the Uncommon.
Which is such a brilliant pivot.
It is, because we are presented with two fundamentally opposing concepts right out of the gate. I mean, supernatural sounds like, a comic book origin story.
Well, like magic or superpowers.
Yeah, it evokes myth and the complete suspension of the laws of physics.
Yeah.
But then common people grounds the entire premise in the mundane reality of, like, the everyday commuter, the person sitting next to you on the bus.
What's fascinating here is the deliberate cognitive dissonance that pairing creates. Your brain immediately recognizes a friction between the fantastical and the pragmatic.
Because they don't usually belong together.
Exactly. Historically, the realm of the supernatural is exclusive, right? It belongs to deities, legendary figures, or some chosen elite.
Not the guy picking up groceries.
Right. It is entirely out of reach for the average individual. So by anchoring that massive esoteric concept with the pragmatic phrase common people, the cover is democratizing the impossible.
Democratizing the impossible. I like that.
It strips the exclusivity away from mysticism and suggests that, hey, operating outside the bounds of normal human physics is actually an accessible, replicable process.
It feels almost like an architectural blueprint or like a software patch for the human operating system.
Yes, a perfect analogy.
It's not telling you that you need to be born a mutant or bitten by a radioactive spider. It's implying a methodology. And I really think the active verb in the title is carrying a lot of that weight too. Becoming.
Oh, for sure. Becoming is active.
Right. It implies an ongoing neurobiological process, a journey from point A to point B. It isn't just a stagnant state of being. But here's the thing. If I am standing in a bookstore and I see a text making the colossal claim that a completely average person can achieve a state that defies natural law, my inherent skepticism is going to flare up.
Naturally, because it's a huge claim.
Exactly. That is a massive proposition that requires a really heavy psychological safety net. How do you get people to take you seriously?
Well, this raises a really important question. What exactly constitutes proof or authority in our modern era?
Data, science, credentials.
Precisely. When someone promises a bridge between mundane reality and a supernatural state, the reader requires an architecture of authority to suspend their disbelief. We are trained to trust empirical data, institutional vetting, and social proof.
And the designers of this cover clearly know this.
They know it intimately, which is why the top and bottom of this cover are heavily fortified with secular, modern credentials.
Yeah, at the bottom in large type we have Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yeah.
And right below that, New York Times best-selling author.
And at the very top, an endorsement, forward by Greg Braden.
So what does this all mean? The heavy emphasis on the doctor prefix, the commercial vetting of the New York Times, the celebrity forward. It seems like a very calculated use of the halo effect.
It absolutely is.
The cover is borrowing the credibility of academia and commercial consensus to shield the esoteric claims of the title. But I'll get to push back on how this is visually executed,
Go for it.
because there seems to be a glaring contradiction here. If the goal is to leverage modern empirical science, to say, trust this doctor, he understands the scientific method, why is the canvas of the cover designed to look like a relic dug out of a Sumerian tomb?
That is the million-dollar question.
Well, I mean, look at the background. It's this highly textured, distressed canvas of faded blues and aged beiges. It literally has scuff marks on it. It looks like a crumbling ancient scroll.
It does.
Doesn't wrapping a doctor's empirical claims in an aesthetic of ancient magic actually risk undermining the scientific authority for a skeptical mind?
You would think so, but actually, that tension is precisely the engine driving the cover's appeal. It isn't a contradiction. It is a synthesis of two deep-seated psychological cravings.
Okay, unpack that for me. What cravings?
Well, consider what that distressed vintage background evokes. It whispers of antiquity, of hermetic traditions, of hidden arcane wisdom that has somehow survived the erosion of centuries.
Right, it feels like forbidden knowledge.
Exactly. The modern seeker wants the romance and mystery of ancient secrets. They crave that. But they also demand the psychological safety net of a peer-reviewed secular framework.
Oh, wow. So they want the magic, but they want it vetted by a doctor.
Yes. When you overlay the credentials of a modern doctor onto an ancient, weathered scroll, the semiotic message is incredibly clear. It says, we have unearthed the lost mystical secrets of human potential, and we have rigorously authenticated them using modern neurobiology and quantum physics.
That dual coding is incredibly potent. It perfectly satisfies the part of the brain that yearns for magic and the part of the brain that demands peer review.
It's delivering the alchemical romance of the past with the empirical safety of the present.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But, the text and the authority markers, they're just the framing. They just set the stage. The actual mechanics of how this transformation from common to supernatural occurs, that requires a different kind of communication entirely.
Right, because a title can make a promise, but it takes an archetype to actually chart the path.
Exactly. Which brings us to the visual schematic that is just completely dominating the center of the cover.
The central illustration. This is the core mechanism of the visual argument.
It's so striking.
It really is. And it is not merely an aesthetic flourish. It is a literal symbol-by-symbol map of the physiological and psychological journey promised by the text. And it actually demands a highly specific chronological reading, moving intentionally from the bottom to the top.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the imagery relies on incredibly ancient archetypes, but they are stacked in a very specific, deliberate sequence. Let's walk through it.
Let's do it, starting at the bottom.
Right. At the very base of the illustration, providing the foundation for everything else, are two human hands. They're drawn in this tactile, almost etched style, and they're tightly gripping the base of a vertical staff.
They look very grounded.
Yeah, they look heavy, physical, and completely ordinary. And then as you follow the staff upward, two serpents are tightly coiled around it. They weave back and forth in this double helix pattern, crossing over each other multiple times as they ascend.
Which is a very familiar shape.
Very. And then, precisely where the snakes end, near the top of the staff, there's a pine cone resting directly on the pole.
Yes, the pine cone.
Expanding outward from behind that pine cone is a massive, highly detailed pair of feathered wings. And finally, hovering in the ethereal space above those wings is a crown radiating intense lines of light, illuminating the absolute apex of the cover.
It's a stunning piece of art, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, this sequence is a literal physiological and energetic translation of the title.
Yeah, it looks like an antique medical symbol, like the caduceus, but heavily, heavily upgraded, like an elevator going up.
The elevator analogy is perfect, because it borrows heavily from the caduceus, the staff of Hermes, which, as you know, we culturally associate with medicine and healing. But it layers it with deeper esoteric neuroanatomy.
How so? Like, break down the levels for us.
Well, the hands at the base are the visual anchor for the common people. They represent the dense, material, physical reality where you, the reader, currently reside.
Right, the everyday mundane world.
Yes. And the grip is firm, which indicates deliberate, conscious effort. You are taking hold of the mechanism.
It's the biological starting line. You are physically grasping the tool. But as we move up the staff, we hit those intertwining serpents. Now, in a purely Western secular context, we see snakes on a staff, and we immediately think of an ambulance logo or a pharmacy.
The medical establishment.
Exactly. But the double helix of the snakes here, it feels much closer to the Eastern concept of kundalini,
Oh, absolutely.
which is, that latent energy residing at the base of the spine, often depicted as a coiled serpent. So the idea is, as you do the work, as you quote-unquote do the uncommon, that energy travels up the central column of the nervous system. The staff is essentially the human sign, and the serpents are the active upward current of neuroelectrical energy.
That is the exact physiological mechanism being promised visually. The serpents represent the active methodology, the deliberate raising of frequency or consciousness.
Moving up the elevator?
Moving up. But I would argue the most revealing symbol in this entire sequence is what sits at the top of that staff.
The pine cone.
The pine cone. It is a highly specific, historically loaded icon.
It's everywhere in ancient art, if you know where to look.
It really is. Across ancient Sumerian carvings, the Egyptian staffs of Osiris, even the staff carried by the Pope today, the pine cone is a recurring motif representing human enlightenment and the awakening of the third eye.
Right, because of its anatomical parallel to the pineal gland, which sits right at the geometric center of the human brain. I mean, Descartes famously called the pineal gland the seat of the soul.
He did.
He believed it was the exact point where the ethereal mind interfaces with the physical body. So placing the pine cone at the top of the staff isn't just a random artistic choice to make it look cool.
No, not at all.
It's a precise biological coordinate. The visual argument is explicitly saying the energy moves up the spine, represented by the snakes, and activates this specific crystalline structure in the brain, the pine cone.
It is essentially a diagram of a biological particle accelerator.
Oh, I love that.
You are spinning base, heavy matter at the bottom, using those physical hands until the energy hits the brain and becomes something entirely different.
And then look at what immediately follows that activation. The wings spread outward from behind the pineal gland.
The wings are crucial. In visual semiotics, wings always represent liberation, transcendence, and freedom from gravity, specifically the heavy physical gravity of those hands at the very bottom of the image.
The moment the energy hits that center, the common limitations of physics just fall away. You take flight, basically.
Exactly. And then the entire sequence culminates in the radiant crown at the absolute apex.
The crown of light. And it's important to note it's not a king's crown. It's not about representing terrestrial power or ruling a country.
No, it's a coronal emission.
Yeah, it represents ultimate sovereignty over the self, neural coherence, a direct connection to a quantum or divine field. So the entire illustration really does act as an elevator of human potential.
It's a complete journey in one image.
You enter at the ground floor with the physical, tactile hands. You ride the method up the spinal staff with the serpents. You activate the biological hardware of the pine cone. You experience the liberation of the wings. And finally, you arrive at the radiant destination of the crown.
The coherence of this design is just staggering when you view it as a complete system.
It's so dense with meaning.
It really is. The text introduces the tension between ordinary life and extraordinary potential. Then the authority markers provide the cognitive permission to believe the claim by fusing ancient Hermetic aesthetics with modern medical credentialing.
The halo effect in full force.
Exactly. And finally, the central emblem provides the structural proof. A literal diagram showing you exactly how the physical body serves as the conduit for this transformation. The image visually validates the bold promise of the text way before your conscious mind has time to dissect the audacity of the claim.
It is such an incredible demonstration of how visual media just completely bypasses our critical faculties. I mean, think about it. You might glance at this cover for mere seconds while waiting in an airport terminal or walking past a bookstore window.
Just a passing glance.
Right. And you aren't consciously decoding the dual meaning of the caduceus. You aren't identifying the historical significance of a Sumerian pine cone. And you definitely aren't sitting there analyzing the cognitive friction between the serif font of supernatural and the italicized pragmatism of common people.
But your subconscious absorbs the entire architecture anyway.
Exactly. You feel the weight of the ancient wisdom. You accept the safety of the medical authority. And your brain just naturally follows that upward ascending momentum of the imagery. You are primed to believe the impossible before you even read the very first page of the book.
It acts as an invitation disguised as a piece of commercial packaging. The brilliance really lies in its ability to synthesize our desire for mystical evolution with our demand for structured scientific safety.
Which is exactly what modern spirituality is always trying to balance.
Completely. And, looking at all of this, it leaves us with a rather profound concept to consider.
Let's hear it.
Well, we navigate a world that is just completely saturated with visual messaging, and most of it we process completely subconsciously.
All day, every day.
Right. So is a single arrangement of text, texture, and ancient archetypes on a simple book cover can so quietly and effectively map out a physiological journey from common hands to a supernatural crown. What other seemingly mundane symbols in our daily environment are actively programming our understanding of our own limitations and potential? What architectures of authority are we accepting without question, simply because they speak the visual language of our deepest desires and our need for safety?
That is the perfect lens to carry with you the next time you find yourself browsing a shelf,
Mm.
or really just navigating any space designed to capture your attention. The visuals are never just decorative, they're always making an argument. Keep your eyes open and question the promises the imagery is making. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.